Tillis20 here, and welcome back to Springwood. Today's episode's taken place out of the city. I did mention a couple of episodes ago that we're going to focus on the city and get it all done in the next episodes. Well, I kind of changed my mind just a touch. There's just been tons of really great assets being put onto the workshop lately, and I've been really meaning to try them out. They're perfect for Springwood, so that's one reason why I'm out of the city. And also, the frame rate in the city is just so bad, and it's really hard to work with. And out over here on the mountain, it's just so much easier. I think it's like 20 to 30 frames per second, whereas the city's like 8 at best. So it's a really nice change. So where I'm actually working is in the Springwood Hills, a bit of a tribute to the Hollywood Hills in Los Angeles. I have a really clear idea, and I'm really inspired to work on this area at this particular time. And the assets that have been uploaded to the workshop as of late, I'm sure you can tell which ones, they're just perfect for this area. So without further ado, let's get into today's build. So probably no surprise to any of you, Griffith Observatory is probably it's been something that I've been really keen to stick down into Springwood since it's been uploaded to the Steam Workshop probably like a month ago. And I've been holding off putting it down because I've been working on the city, but there are a whole bunch of other assets that have just been recently uploaded onto the Steam Workshop, so I've been keen to stick them down as well. As much as I'm trying not to copy Los Angeles, I am sort of copying Los Angeles, and I cannot help but stick this observatory down. And it just fits in perfectly in this area. And like, I'm going to use the model, but I'm going to change the shape and where it kind of sits, and everything else that goes around it is going to be pretty different. Before I start rambling about what I'm doing in the time lapse, just want to say thanks to everybody who put their 2 cents in about the change in the way I'm making the videos in the last episode. I'm going to continue making them like this. I really enjoyed it, even though it took a lot longer to make. Like that last episode it took forever to piece together. But now that I know the formula, I can piece together these episodes a bit better. But that also kind of brings me to my next point. It's weird. I don't know how YouTube works, but it's really interesting to see how the view counts. I don't know, like the view count doesn't seem to add up to the quality of my videos. Like my most viewed video is by far not the greatest video I've recorded. Whereas my best video, being the last video I recorded, didn't take off as well as some of the shittier episodes that I've recorded. So like, I don't really understand how YouTube works, but I mean, I don't want to sound like that YouTube guy, but if you've enjoyed the very first 2 minutes of this episode, smash the like button. We'll see how this goes. But yeah, that's enough of all that nonsense. It's time to get back to what I'm actually building. And what I've been doing the last 5 minutes is just mapping out where I want things to sit on this mountain. I find it's easier to place down the roads and then move them around using Move It. If you don't have Move It, definitely grab it. It's an awesome mod. I use it for everything, and it's so responsive and so easy to use. It's really great mod. What I'm trying to do here is I want to create ridges in this mountain. So where there's like a ridge coming out of the mountain, I kind of trickle it down the mountain so that it affects the roads and the houses and everything that sits on this mountain. This particular mountain I want to be pretty bare and dry, whereas there will be a couple of exceptions of areas where there's going to be some trees. What I was really playing with here is the new Springwood LUT and map theme, which is, I reckon, super awesome. I am being a bit biased though, and I'm just like painting down some areas just to make it look really dry. And these roads are really wiggly and all over the place, really unstructured compared to a lot of the rigid grids that I have in the city. And like, I am basing this off LA. Not just LA, but I am basing it off Hollywood Hills, where they are just all over the place. It's kind of like an interesting area. It feels like LA is so structured and so neat, whereas you get to these mountains and they're just, these people are like so filthy rich, but all the houses are just so, I don't know, it almost feels like it's the Wild West or something. I don't know, again, Australian romanticizing what America looks like, but it just feels like it's a bit Wild Western and all over the place. So I do want the mountains to kind of look like that in this episode, well, just throughout. But I don't actually get to putting down any houses in this episode. Terraforming this mountain took ages, and getting all the trees down and getting the feel right took ages and ages. And I do like place down trees and I'll delete them, and I place them and I delete them. Like, it takes ages to figure out where I want things to sit. And like in the last episode, I did use this mountain grass a lot by P. Delmo, and it's a prop so that it kind of means that you can just stick it onto any land mass, and it, you know, follows the contour of the land, which is really, really useful for an area like this. But I do want a lot of dryness in this area, and I mean, it's called mountain grass, but really, I mean, like, people are miniature in this game, so I mean, it's really, they're more bushes than they are grasses. So I do use it more of a bush than I use it as a grass. Further down the track, maybe in the next couple of episodes, it would be kind of cool to stick one of the cable cars going up this mountain, maybe to the top or maybe to the observatory. I think that might be a really cool little touch to this area, just to make it a little bit more unique rather than making it look like it's another Hollywood Hill mountain. So like, I let me know if you think that's a good idea. I think it's kind of cool. Actually, talking about the new update, I mean, it's the 15th right now as I record this, so it's pretty close to coming out. And just a little tip, because I mean, if you're using a lot of mods like I am, it's going to totally ruin everything, the update. They always do. And as much as I'm thrilled about this update coming out, I do prefer my mods, and I prefer, you know, some blimps that carry people around the city. So something that I've done to fix this is, if you go into Steam, you right click on City Skylines and you go into the settings, you can change when your game updates. And if you change it to update when you launch the game, that way it only will update when it's connected to the internet. So from now on, until all the mods I know that I use are going to be updated and fixed for the update, I'll just continue to launch the game in offline mode. So I've just been plopping down some different paths and lookouts and fences, and now I'm kind of working on a bit of a park, because I want this area to start to be a bit of a mix of walking trails and bushland and parks. And like, to walk a little bit further down the track, we'll start putting in some houses, real huge mansions, and maybe even just like probably quite a lot of detail in this area. And I'm really excited to start doing that. I know. I was meant to be working on the downtown and all that, but you know, you just got to go where you feel inspired, I guess. And I want this area to look really dry. I mean, this is starting to get, as we get further away from the coastline, Springwood is going to be a quite dry area. So, I mean, this is a mix between forest and a dry landscape. So, like, I'm trying to get a bit of a mix of that. So as we get closer to the top of the mountain, it gets drier and less trees. And I mean, this isn't even one of the tallest mountains in Springwood. I mean, there's a whole bunch of really big ones in the background of Springwood. I'll add some of them in the cinematics. And so I'm trying to keep that in mind, that it's not a really big mountain. So I'm trying to figure out the size of it and how everything fits into it. Over here, I'm really working hard at trying to create ridges. So, I mean, if you've got any experience trying to do some terraforming with the game, it's kind of hard to get really sharp ridges, which is really iconic around Los Angeles. I mean, all these mountains they've got these really defined ridges and all these walking trails that are walking on them, which is they look so awesome. And I wanted to incorporate that into these mountains. So I was trying to, and I think this is the best way I've found to create these ridges, is to use just the one square terraforming tool and then just going through and just chopping it up a little bit. Ronix has just released these retaining walls too, another asset that I've been really keen to use, and I mean, it fits in so perfectly in this area, and just to hold up some of these sheer cliffs that are just really iconic in Los Angeles and the mountains. So I did want to put a couple of these in, one of the reasons why I've been wanting to work on this mountain. And I'm also putting in these trails to mark where people have been walking. I want these mountains to be scattered with lots of different trails. Some I want to be really well established, and some I just want to almost look like people have just taken shortcuts and just walking every which way. You know, so some are really well mapped out, and some are just little slithers of what used to be a bit of a trail. On the topic of Ronix, another asset that I've been really keen to use are the tunnels that he's basically just released in the last couple of weeks. And I mean, they add so much to the tunnel. I mean, the tunnels, I don't mind the tunnels, the vanilla tunnels in the game, but it's good to have a bit of variety. And they fit in really nicely with this mountain. I feel like this mountain's really rugged and dry, and getting into the countryside, I think it's really nice to have a bit of variety and a bit more detail in some of the finer areas of the city. And like, I really enjoyed making these windy roads creeping up the mountain. I wanted some spots to be really steep, some spots to be, you know, a bit safer than other areas. And also, I'm just kind of experimenting with where I want the ridges to sit on the mountain, and thinking about what's going to be plopped down in the next few episodes too, because I am pretty keen to work in this area. I mean, let me know if you want me to go back to the city. If you raise a good point, I'll definitely go back, but I am super motivated to work in this area at the moment. There's just so many great assets. I mean, I'm only just touching on the assets that I really want to use in this area. So I'm really keen to stick in a couple more. And I did plan for this episode to go for a little bit longer and to work on a couple of other areas, but I am trying to keep the episodes a little bit shorter than 30 minutes. I don't even know how you guys listen to an episode for 30 minutes. I do appreciate it though. I definitely do appreciate it. This road that I'm working on is a little bit like a highway, though it's an avenue. I intend it to be a bit more of a highway because I don't want too much to be around this area. So these mountains that we're working on in the next few episodes are kind of like the barrier of high density living that is Springwood, and then the outer suburbs, which are more spread out neighborhoods. I only want a couple of roads creeping past these mountains. This is one of the roads that stretches along just in front of the Springwood Dam, and it'll probably end up like reaching a distant neighborhood or maybe even a national park. I mean, let me know what you think. I mean, could reach something different, but I do like the idea that we are actually now creeping away from the main sprawl of Springwood and getting into more distant neighborhoods. So I really like the detail I put here on this lookout, and I've stuck these cars here. I mean, it's kind of like make out point, but I've also put these bikes here to kind of be a bit more of like a biker gang kind of driving around the ridges, and they've just stopped here for a break. And I've plopped down these events, I think they're called event people placer, something like that, but it's basically attracts large groups of people to an area, whereas like I've used park people placer, and it's just like you might get like 2 people, whereas these ones actually attract a lot of different, like a huge amount of people. The only problem with that is I really would be really cool to have like a biker gang there with like leather jackets and helmets, but it just attracts tourists, people like, you know, people holding bags and that fat guy with binoculars. So I am now detailing this area a little bit more. As you can see, I've deleted a lot of trees that was once sitting here. I'd delete more. I'd also plop down more, which is kind of counterintuitive. But I think I'd do it because trees can hide a lot of mistakes that you make in the game. I know I use trees a lot just to kind of cover up a lot of the shit that I plop down and that I need to fix up. For the last little bit of this time lapse, I'm going to start working on the observatory. And like I said before, I'm basing it off Griffith, I keep going to say university, but it's not a university, it's observatory. I'm sorry, we have a Griffith University in Australia, so I just keep on meaning to say it. But I'm basing it off that, but the car park's going to be really different. And I don't usually do very highly detailed car parks, but because this is such a main focus of the city, not a main focus, but like it's a big focus, I do put a bit more effort into these sort of areas. If you wanted to see me plopping down like ridiculous amounts of car parks, that I did that on the last episode, so I mean, definitely go and check that out if you haven't already. This particular car park, I was originally planning to use the ploppable asphalt mod, but the ground was just really uneven, so I decided not to use it and just grittier it up with different decals, which you'll see me do in a little while. With the cars here, I'm making them so that they're parked really close to the entrance of the observatory. Like, this is something I remember Fresh doing last year, and it stuck me. Kind of like, oh, of course, that makes so much sense. So I kind of am just trying to do a little bit of that too. If you're kind of wondering about these cars, if you're not familiar with my work, all the cars here are made by, not all of them, but pretty much made by Archie Cunningham. I've mentioned him before. He's this really, really talented car designer, and yeah, go and check his stuff out if you haven't already, but he makes very great looking old school kind of cars. So, I mean, he's really kindly made some ploppable versions for me, which is really, really good. And I mean, it's not just for me, but yeah, I mean, he's helping me out a lot by doing that. And I just realized that this car park doesn't actually have a room for like charter buses, or like, you know, buses holding lots of tourists and stuff, which is really disappointing. Like, I didn't even think about that. So I might actually stick that in the time lapse, not the time lapse, in the cinematics towards the end. Over here, I wanted to make a bit of a park, but not a very beautiful park. I wanted it to be kind of just to the sides, a bit of a nice lookout, some benches, and a railing so people don't fall off. Like, I didn't want it to be anything too crash hot. I definitely only want some areas of this observatory to look really well maintained, whereas other areas to be a bit pieced together. I mean, if you can imagine, this is perched on top of a mountain. It would be really hard to work with. It's not surrounded by other buildings which would influence the surrounding. It's just by itself. So I wanted it to look like it was only really used by tourists and people who are kind of going for like bushwalks and things like that. I know I keep referring to the trees as bush. Does that sound weird to you guys? Because I know in Australia we call like trees and shrubs bush, but I'm not even sure if that's a term overseas. So, yeah, I mean that's what I'm referring to. I'm referring to trees and forest. Really enjoyed doing high amounts of detail in this area. I mean, I think in the city I'm more conscious of not putting as much detail in as I would like to. Whereas in these sort of areas where, I mean, the frame rate's beautiful and I can work with this area a little bit easier, it's really nice to put in the sort of detail I would really like to. So, like, that's another reason why I'm pretty keen to work in this area. It's just really nice to work with. And even plopping down this building here and all the trees and all the props that come down here, it has barely changed the frame rate, which is really cool. I mean, it's really encouraging for me because, I mean, working in the city, in the city in Springwood, it's just like the frame rate is just so brutal. It's so brutal, and it just makes you go like, oh man, like this game is not going to handle the idea that I have. But coming out into these countrysides, into the countryside, it's just a lot smoother and easier, and it just makes me think that, like, I mean, this game gets a lot of slack for its for like how bad it handles huge amounts of information like props and buildings and people and everything that's kind of going around. But I mean, my game only struggles when I'm in super busy areas and it's unpaused, and that's why I don't do as much live play as a lot of other people do, because in the city it's just too hard to handle. But now that I'm working out of the city a little bit more, I think I can actually handle a bit more live play. I mean, it was so smooth and easy out this area. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, if you're interested in some live play, definitely let me know in the comments below. But that's pretty much it for this episode, guys. Thanks again for watching as usual. Really appreciate all the support and everyone making comments. You know what I mean? Commenting. And if you've enjoyed this episode and you would like to see more like this, a thumbs up would be very much appreciated. And click and subscribe, and the bell icon next to the subscribe button means that you won't miss an episode, which is highly recommended. But until next time, have a good week, and I'll catch you guys again next week. See ya.